Hola a todos! Today we're talking about you.
Me? Yes, you.
Well, not you specifically, just the actual word you. It's a word we use all the time in English conversations where there's only really one way to say it. That's where a lot of students get confused when they learn the Spanish language actually has two different ways to say you. Usted and tú. Both words mean you, so how do you know when to use which? That's exactly what you'll learn in this lesson. So, what's the big difference between usted and tú anyway? To put it simply, usted is more formal and tú is informal. If you can remember this easy rule, then you'll avoid confusing the two words 90% of the time. But of course, there is a lot more nuance to understand in order to make sure that you use the correct word. However, no need to fret because we're going to dive into all the specific scenarios you need to know in order to really understand usted and tú. When deciding which word to use to address someone, it's best to keep in mind not only what type of person they are in relation to you, but also the country, city, and region you're in. That's because the usted versus tú rules are upheld more in some Spanish-speaking countries than others. This probably sounds like a lot, but don't feel overwhelmed. As a Spanish student, locals will understand that you aren't speaking your native language, so you don't need to worry too much about disrespecting somebody by accidentally using the wrong pronoun. Still, knowing the difference makes your Spanish skills that much more mature and refined. So, now that you know the background behind these words, let's look at the differences between how usted and tú are conjugated with some of the most common Spanish verbs. Let's start with how to conjugate some basic verbs. This will be the foundation of the rest of our lesson. The verb ser, meaning to be, would be conjugated as es in the usted form. In the tú form, it would be conjugated as eres. The verb estar, also meaning to be, would be conjugated as está in the usted form. However, in the tú form, you would use estás instead. The verb tener, meaning to have, would be conjugated as tiene in the usted form and tienes in the tú form. Next, we've got the verb ir, which means to go. If you address someone as usted, you would have conjugate the verb as va. However, speaking more casually in the tú form, you would say vas. Finally, a really common verb that you'll use is querer, meaning to want. In the usted form, it's quiere, while the tú form is simply quieres. Now that we've reviewed some basic verbs, let's take a look at how usted and tú are used with reflexive pronouns. If you're using usted to address somebody, the reflexive pronoun that you'll need to use is se. If you're talking to someone with the tú form, the reflexive pronoun of your sentence will be te. Remember, if you want to learn how to speak Spanish, make sure to check out baselang.com, where you can get access to unlimited one-on-one Spanish classes with native-speaking teachers, all via Zoom. Now that you know the rules for using usted and tú, let's see some examples of informal tú sentences and formal usted sentences. ¿Usted es su mamá? Is a formal way of asking, are you her mom? Alternatively, ¿Tú eres su mamá? Is an informal way of asking the same question. Notice how the subtle differences we discussed are showing up in these sentences? Let's look at one more example. ¿Quiere que lo o la despierte temprano? Would be a formal way of asking someone, do you want me to wake you up early? In the usted form, of course. In the informal tú form, this would look like, ¿Quieres que te despierte temprano? Do you want me to wake you up early? You can see how these subtle changes are small but super noticeable. Great job! Now you know how to use tú and usted in Spanish conversation. But what about when to use each word? Since we only have one word to say you in English, learning how to address people differently can take some getting used to. But once you know the general guidelines, you'll be comfortable with it in no time. Before we jump into that, be sure to subscribe to the Baselang YouTube channel if you're enjoying this lesson and don't want to miss out on any more awesome Spanish tutorials. Now let's go over when to use tú. When we use the pronoun tú, that action is called tuteo. So, what are the situations where you should use this personal pronoun? Número uno. when there is a relationship of trust between people. This might be your friends, family, co-workers, a significant other, or even your classmates. For instance, you might say, Tú me dijiste que irías conmigo a la fiesta. No me dejes solo o sola. You told me you'd go to the party with me. Don't leave me alone. This rule is pretty easy to remember, but what about when your conversation partner is a complete stranger? In this case, rule number 2 is to ask yourself if they appear to be the same age or younger than you. If the answer is yes, then you can comfortably use tú with them. Whether they are a waiter, a hotel receptionist, a store clerk, or just a random person on the street who you want to ask a question. For instance, you might say, ¿Tú estás perdido o perdida? Si quieres, yo puedo ir contigo hasta la estación de policía. Are you lost? If you want, I can go with you to the police station. Now that you know age plays a big factor in which pronoun you should use, this next rule probably won't surprise you. The third type of person you can use tú with is children. In fact, it's always best to use the simplest vocabulary when chatting with a child. You can ask a child something like, Tú tienes que hacer tu tarea. You have to do your homework. And here's a quick tip to keep in mind. In Spanish, personal pronouns can be omitted, but conjugations must always match. When it comes to using usted, it's really all about respect. There are really 2 main groups of people that you'll want to use this pronoun with. Number 1 is older people. It is very common for people to use usted with their in-laws, for example. You might also use it to address your friend's grandparents. You can say something polite like, ¿Usted quiere que le ayude con la cena? Do you want me to help you with dinner? It's a nice gesture of respect you can show to anyone older than you. The second group of people you should use usted with are bosses or senior executives. We all know that speaking with a boss feels very different from casual chit-chat with coworkers. So when you're going to speak with someone at a higher rank in your company, it's better that you use usted instead of tú. For instance, you can say, Aquí están los documentos que usted solicitó temprano. Here are the documents you requested earlier. Knowing the do's and don'ts of usted and tú is a great way of showing Spanish speakers respect and effort. But it's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people still find usted a bit too formal or awkward to use regularly in conversation. And if you feel this way, there is a solution. You can just substitute the word with señor for sir or mister and señora for lady or Mrs. before you say the person's name. If you choose to use this method, keep in mind that the conjugation of the verb will stay the same as if you were using usted. Let's look at some examples. Buenos días, señor Pablo. Good morning, Mr. Pablo. Que tenga un buen día, señora Clara. Have a nice day, Mrs. Clara. And just like that, you're ready to start using usted and tú in everyday conversations like a pro. But before we wrap up today's lesson, why not see just a few more examples of common expressions that differ in conjugation between usted and tú? It never hurts to have a few more phrases in your toolbox. To ask someone their name in the more casual tú form, you can say, ¿Cuál es tu nombre? But if you were using usted, you would say, ¿Cuál es su nombre? See the small difference? See if you can spot it in the next example. To inquire if somebody needs your help in the tú form, you can say, ¿Necesitas ayuda? While in the usted form, this would be, ¿Necesita ayuda? These are just a couple examples of phrases you might find yourself saying commonly. Remember, if you want to learn how to speak Spanish, why not schedule your first class with a Baseline teacher today? At baseline.com, you can get access to unlimited one-on-one Spanish classes with native speaking teachers all via Zoom. Try your first week for only $1. We've got a ton more helpful examples and practice questions in our complete guide on usted versus tú, so be sure to check that out in the link in the description below. Once you're comfortable using these words, a whole world of conversational opportunities opens up to you. After all, just think about how much your daily speech involves asking questions directly to other people or giving them commands. To learn more about giving suggestions, commands, or orders in Spanish using the skills you've just learned in this lesson, check out our guide on the imperative mood next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.